Welcome. I'm so happy you're here. In this session, I'm going to talk about design thinking and how it connects to creating dashboards. At the University of Arizona, we've used design thinking to create user-centric dashboards that empower our stakeholders to make effective decisions. Dashboards are very useful for communicating the findings of a model, sharing trends in data, and creating interactive spaces for users to engage with the model. Design thinking provides a framework for creating impactful dashboards that support user needs. I'm Jenn Schilling, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm so glad you're here. I have a decade of experience in data science, and I'm currently a senior research analyst at the University of Arizona in the Department of University Analytics and Institutional Research. I serve as an adjunct faculty member at the College for Creative Studies, where I teach graduate classes on data visualization, and I also recently started my own company, Schilling Data Studio, which is focused on teaching people how to create impactful data visualizations. I have additional experience as a middle school teacher, data visualization consultant, operations research engineer in the supply chain, and statistician in advertising and market research. I love data visualization and design, and I'm really excited to share dashboard design thinking with you today. Thanks so much for being here. After today's presentation, you'll be able to explain the 6 steps of design thinking, relate design thinking to dashboard design, provide examples of dashboard design thinking, and apply design thinking to your next dashboard project. The rest of this workshop will flow through each of these outcomes. First, I'll define design thinking and explain each step. I'll spend most of our time together detailing each step of the design thinking process in relation to dashboard design, and I'll share some examples of dashboard design thinking at the end. Let's get started. First, let's define design thinking. Design thinking is an ideology and process for solving complex problems in a user-centric way, ensuring great experiences and outcomes for the user. The 6 phases of design thinking, according to the Nielsen-Norman Group, are empathize with your users to understand them, define your users' needs, their problem, and your insights, ideate by challenging assumptions and brainstorming ideas for creative solutions, prototype to start creating solutions and understand what parts of your ideas work, test solutions by returning to your users for feedback and making sure it meets their needs, and implement the final solution and communicate the final product. Empathize and define help us understand the problem, ideate and prototype help us explore solutions, test and implement help us materialize the final product. So why should we use design thinking? Design thinking offers value to professionals like us working in data science by focusing on the audience to find out what they need and want to enhance their data-informed decision-making. Design thinking is also beneficial because it is user-centered. It starts with the collection of information from and understanding the user and their needs, and ends with testing solutions with the user to get feedback. Design thinking encourages innovation and collaboration since it involves exploring multiple options for the same problem. I'm going to focus on applying design thinking to dashboards, but this same framework works for many different data science problems, including machine learning and other modeling techniques. How does design thinking relate to creating dashboards? Incorporating the principles of design thinking can help provide a method for dealing with ambiguous and complex problems, like designing and building a dashboard. Human-centered design can also help ensure the resulting insights are actionable and valuable for your audience, who remain at the core of the process. The power in this method is that it provides a gradual step-by-step framework to get from a problem space with many unknowns to a well-defined solution. Here are the 5 steps of design thinking with a dashboard focus. As we saw a moment ago, the first step is to empathize. Take time to understand your users. What questions are they trying to answer with data? What goals do they have? And what frustrations burden them? The next step is to do user research and help identify and define the core problems your users have in using and accessing data. Then you challenge your existing assumptions and create ideas. You want to throw all possible solutions on the table before committing yourself to one. And in this step, you look for alternative ways to view the problem and identify solutions. Brainstorming and mind mapping can be critical parts of this step. Rapid prototyping can provide an opportunity to get feedback from your users about your solution. This is your opportunity to experiment with solutions. Then you test and try out your solutions to evaluate the results. You return to your users for feedback on the solution. And finally, you put your vision into effect through implementation. But it's important to realize that the process does not necessarily end here. You'll continue to return to your users to evaluate and refine your solutions, or in this case, dashboards. Communication is another part of this implementation step to share the dashboard with users and explain use cases. These steps are not always sequential, and they're often repeated in an iterative fashion. Next, we're going to go through each step in a little bit more detail. The goal of the Empathize step is to understand the audience, use cases, and purpose of the dashboard. One way to do this is through empathy mapping. This could be done with the internal project team or by speaking with individual users. The goal is to embody or capture what the user says, thinks, does, and feels. You can also consider what some of their goals are. Here's an example from the Nielsen-Norman group of an empathy map for a user thinking of buying a TV. An empathy map is a quick, digestible way to illustrate user attitudes and behaviors. Once it's been created, it acts as a source of truth throughout the project, and it can protect the project from unbiased or biased assumptions or unfounded assumptions. To create your own empathy map, you can have a brainstorming session with the team creating the dashboard and fill out each quadrant with how you think the user feels, what they say, think, and do with the data they currently have, or the dashboard that you're creating. You can think about their current experience trying to access the data they want presented in the dashboard. You can also brainstorm some of their final goals for the project. Once you've completed the empathy map, you can look for themes within and across the quadrants. You can also look for gaps in your understanding that need to be addressed before you move forward. An empathy map can be helpful both at the start of the project to get a better understanding of the end user and throughout the project as a touch point to verify that the solution is meeting the user's needs. Some other questions you can consider during the empathy step are: who will use the dashboard? What is important to them? And what do they want to know? How will this dashboard save the user time? How will it make their job easier and help them find the information they need? And how can the dashboard be personalized or made especially meaningful and relevant for the user? In the define step, we create problem statements and write out the specifications of the dashboard. The goal of this step is to document the scope, timeline, and roles of the project, as well as clearly explain the goals and problem. Clearly documenting and defining the problem and expected outcomes of the dashboard makes it clear for everyone what is being worked towards in the project. Consider what the measurements of success will be. What does it look like to successfully complete this project? Who determines when it is complete? Defining the measures of success and outcomes helps keep the project on track and makes it easier for everyone to complete the work. Discussing this with the user also ensures that everyone's on the same page, and it reduces the number of revisions that might need to be made later. Here's some additional questions that you can ask during this step. What key pieces of information should be displayed? What questions should the dashboard answer? What trends should the dashboard show? Those types of questions can then help answer kind of internal questions to the team developing the dashboard about what type of dashboard is needed, what data is available, what levels of detail should be shown. And you can also think about if there are specific requirements for how the data is presented. For example, does the dashboard need to be easy to email or easy to export? And how will users interact with the dashboard? Is there going to be a simulation component where the user can test different parameters in a machine learning model, or is it going to be more static? The goal is to design a dashboard that will help the user be more efficient and only include what is important and necessary. Based on what you learn in the Empathize and Define steps, you can now generate ideas for dashboard solutions. You want to remain open and curious during this step. The goal is to generate a broad set of ideas with no attempt to judge or evaluate them. Look for alternate ways to view the problem and identify innovative solutions. The focus of the Ideate step is quantity over quality. Certainly, the eventual goal is to create a high-quality solution to the problem, but the focus of ideation is to generate several options first and then narrow down which ideas to pursue, so the more ideas, the better in this stage. It's a good idea to set a time limit and have all participants write or draw as many ideas as they can. Remember, the details and aesthetics don't matter at this stage. The goal is just to generate a lot of ideas. Once a large number of ideas have been generated, then you can take a break. And after the break, return to the list of ideas. The team might be able to identify themes of similar ideas and group them together. As you go through the ideas, keep the Empathize and Define stages in mind and consider the goals and benefits of each idea. The team should work together to determine the top few ideas or combination of ideas to prototype and test. Keep in mind the following questions. What will be easy to understand and convey the message? How can the dashboard provide the greatest degree of understanding with the least amount of effort by the user? Ideation can occur synchronously or asynchronously. You could hold a meeting and brainstorm together, or you could create a Slack channel or a Teams channel for people to share ideas as they think of them over a period of days. And you could also combine these methods. And a few things to consider and keep in mind as you ideate. Think about different informations of the layout or different layouts of information. Do you want multiple columns on the dashboard or a single column? How can you organize the information into different sections? Is there a highlight section with key metrics at a single point in time and then a details section with those same metrics shown over time or at a more granular level? So think about the different levels of information and how you're going to lay them out on the dashboard. You also want to think about where you're putting the most important information. So key performance indicators, KPIs, and other important key data points should be in your top left corner. And it's a good idea to start with the big picture and move into more detail as you go throughout the dashboard. You also want to group related things together. Data points that are similar should be grouped together on the dashboard so it's easier for the user to understand and draw conclusions. And you want to use an appropriate graph for the relationship or message you want to show. You can brainstorm different data visualizations during this ideate stage, but keep in mind that certain graphs work best for certain types of data. For example, line graphs are best for showing data over time. Prototypes allow us to experiment with a few ideas from the ideation step in order to identify the best possible solution. A prototype is a quick, scaled-down version of the product. The goal is to create something a little more refined than in the ideate stage, but not a complete, usable product. Through prototyping, you can weigh the impact versus the feasibility of your ideas. Think of it as an experiment to test out a hypothesis. Prototyping allows you to create space to explore and test the functionality of your ideas without committing to building out multiple iterations. It also helps find issues with the layout or structure prior to development and makes collaboration easier since the prototype can provide a plan for the final product. Finally, a prototype allows you to receive feedback from the end user and colleagues earlier. Don't worry about making the prototype look exactly like the final product. A prototype can be made in any medium. For example, prototypes can be made in PowerPoint, in Word, Excel, Adobe, or even on paper. A few things to consider in your prototype from user interface design principles. You want to organize the information to guide the user through the data. So people usually scan horizontally across a page and then down. So again, you want to put your most important information in the top left. You also want to be consistent in formatting, layout, graph styles, labels, fonts, and colors to organize the data and guide the user. You want to try and keep it simple. Each element on your dashboard should serve a purpose. You want to remove distractions from the design and leave some white space. Users want to be able to easily find the information they need, so limit the number of charts and data points on the dashboard to avoid clutter and draw attention to key metrics. Chart choices should also be made based on data visualization best practices, such as pre-attentive attributes and Gestalt principles. You also want to provide visual cues to help the user navigate the dashboard. This can be done by including clear titles and labels on charts, using the appropriate chart type for the type of data. You can also use color as a visual cue to highlight important information. Adding context to the dashboard provides additional information that the user might need to interpret the data. And the last guideline is to get color right by making sure it's consistent. It's also important to try and limit the use of color so that it's easier for the user to understand and interpret, and they're not distracted by all kinds of different colors on your dashboard or kind of bombarded by a lot of information to process and trying to figure out what all the different colors mean. Once you've developed a few prototypes based on key data points, graphs, and your audience and goal, the next step is to test it by getting feedback on the prototype. Think about the use cases for the dashboard. Does the prototype meet the needs of the users? Go back to the project brief and empathy map and think about whether the prototype fulfills the user's requirements. Once you've done some testing, you can revise the prototype based on feedback. Consider how it could be personalized and show the user what's relevant to them. Can it be made any simpler? This step is a collaborative and iterative process. After making changes based on feedback, you can go back to the users and find out if the updated prototype better meets their needs. During this stage, you should also make sure that the prototype will work across multiple devices and meets accessibility requirements. Here are some guidelines for conducting prototype tests from the Interaction Design Foundation. First, let the users compare multiple prototypes and tell you what they prefer and don't prefer. Let the user experience the prototype. Try not to over-explain how it works or how it solves the problem. Instead, let the user experience the prototype and observe how they react. Ask users to explain their experience exploring and using the prototype. Consider asking, what are you thinking right now as you're doing this? Observe how your user uses the prototype. Are they using it how you intended or not? If a user makes a mistake or misinterprets something, that is valuable feedback for how the prototype can be improved. Ask follow-up questions like, what do you mean when you say, how did that make you feel, and why, to get deeper into their experience. The final stage is to implement the best possible solution. Based on prototyping and testing, you can determine the final design to move forward with. Remember to think back to the empathize and define steps. Consider the user again and the message of the dashboard. Think about the goal of the dashboard and what it is trying to convey. Did it achieve that goal and convey the right information during the testing step? If not, be sure to go back and adjust the prototype and consider doing an additional round of testing prior to implementation. Remember that one general goal is to design a dashboard that will help the user be more efficient, and to this end, it is important to include only what is necessary. Efficiency here is in terms of the user accessing the information they need in the easiest way possible. It's also important to revisit the problem and the measures of success created in the define step to ensure that the dashboard meets all the requirements. You can go back to the user needs and project brief to check that all the needs are met. After the design has been implemented, add context and definitions to the dashboard. It's also important to do another thorough round of testing. Internally, it's important to test all the filters and validate the data points. Externally, it's helpful to have another user test the dashboard and provide final feedback. Finally, consider how you'll communicate and explain what has been built so that the users can easily find the information they need. Revisiting the definition of design thinking, as well as the entire process, it's important to understand that these stages are different modes which contribute to the entire dashboard design project rather than sequential steps. You may move through these steps in a linear fashion, but more often you'll go back and forth between them. You may find during the Ideate step that you need to go back and better understand the user and define the problem more clearly. There's certainly a lot of iteration between the prototype and test stages, and after implementation, it's important to go back to testing one more time. Your goal throughout this project or this process is to gain the deepest understanding of the users and what their ideal solution and product would be. Next, we'll take a look at a few examples from my department of different stages of design thinking. First, the University of Arizona Interactive Factbook is a great example of the iterative process of design thinking. The Interactive Factbook is our way of communicating university data to the public. It's hosted on my department's website and available to anyone. It shows information about our students, faculty, and staff. We've made continuous improvements to this tool. It began as a series of tables, then we moved into visualizations using default Tableau formatting, and most recently we implemented our own department design system and thought more critically about the best visualizations to convey the necessary information to our users. This process embodies the ideate, prototype, test, and implement stages of design thinking. The Interactive Factbook updates also considered user experience, and by empathizing with our users and defining their use cases for the tool, we created more simplified dashboards using consistent colors and fonts from our design system. We separated the dashboard into different sections to help with usability. We also implemented big numbers, graphs, and tables to provide the user with multiple forms of the data. And finally, we improved accessibility by defining the focus order so that users can navigate the dashboards in the correct order with a keyboard and screen reader. So this process was in using the empathize and define steps. The development of another set of dashboards by my department called Arizona Profiles also embodies several steps of design thinking. The entire department collaborated with campus partners to meet the various needs of our users with this tool. Arizona Profiles is an internal tool that provides a landing page for users accessing university data. It provides more detailed information than the Interactive Factbook and serves as a key portal for our internal campus users. In this slide, you can see one of the initial prototype designs created for the tool in Excel. One of the primary considerations in the design of Arizona Profiles was to provide the most important piece of data in the upper left corner of the dashboard. In the student headcount profile, the current undergraduate and graduate student counts are provided for a selected college or department. Each of the following tiles provides more breakouts for these metrics and trends on the important headcounts. Arizona Profiles was also extensively tested by users and also internally within our department. Each section of Arizona Profiles also includes a reference guide to provide additional data literacy and definitions on the terms and data presented. This is one way the team empathized with users of the tool and made sure clear context was provided in the implementation. The tool itself also defaults to a filter based on your own college or department. And so this is a way that we also personalize the tool to make it so that it provided users with the information that they needed in an easy and accessible way. In this workshop, you learned about each step in the design thinking process and how it relates to the creation of a dashboard. I talked through how to complete each step in the process and associated some examples from the University of Arizona to different steps in the design thinking process. What's your key takeaway from today? Thank you so much for attending this session. I really hope you found it helpful. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I've included my email address as well as my Twitter handle on this slide. Thanks so much for attending.